All right. We are live, the first of what will be many big days breaking down games throughout the rest of the season. But we get here the first Friday of the year, the first set of marquee games. I think there was some commentary out there that the opening week of the season maybe not going to be that interesting going into this Friday. We've actually had a lot of interesting games lead up to this point, but this Friday should be something special with 11 top 100 matchups from the preseason KenPom rankings. Hunter, you're down in is it Lake Charles there at McNeese, getting ready for a little 3-game tune-up, I would say, for them, as they are going to play some not of the strongest opponents, but coming off that great win against VCU. Hunter, are you excited for this Friday? How are the vibes down there at McNeese? I got to imagine they're pretty excited after that opening victory.
Yeah, vibes are great. Had the chance to go to practice yesterday. I think the team is excited about what they did going into VCU, the Siegel Center. Coach Wade said it well in his interview. They're not going to drop more than a handful of games there all year. So for McNeese to go there and start the year off with a W was huge, and I think really sets the tone for what they're capable of. Vibes are great. One thing about the team is that they still have two players, CJ Felder, the transfer from Florida, and Mike Saunders, the guy coming over from Utah. Those two both still aren't eligible due to the two-time transfer rule, and McNeese still went up to the Siegel Center and got that W. So you see those two come back, and they got Christian Shoemate as well. That's three potential all those guys could win the Southland Player of the Year, to be honest. This team's stacked with talent. I'm super excited to see them in person. I'll be sitting courtside today.
Beautiful. We look forward to getting some content down there with our boys at McNeese. And I also saw an interview, I think from a couple of days ago, with Coach Wade, kind of saying we're not tempering the expectations. Things have been down at McNeese for decades almost, and this is one of the biggest wins in program history. And some coaches would say let's stay level headed, let's not get too excited. He's saying no, let's get the vibes rolling down here at McNeese. And so and I saw he was good. The crowd pretty excited about it too. So even though not the toughest of competition, it's a good chance to carry that momentum down there this weekend.
Yeah, they're doing a lot of great marketing. They got Willie the Kid and the Bayou Bandits, the student sections of the saloon. So it should be a really fun environment. And then you talked about McNeese being down over 2 decades since they made the dance. But Lake Charles is a tough community. It went through a lot with the hurricanes a few years ago. But yeah, really bouncing back. The community's welcomed Coach Wade with open arms, and this team's ready to rock.
Beautiful. Well, we'll be keeping tabs, as I've said, all season long on what's going down there at McNeese, and still have yet to see a national championship future on McNeese. So again, if anybody has that, send it my way. Special things happening down there in Lake Charles. And before moving into some of the marquee games today, just wanted to touch on a great game last night, a couple good games last night, actually. The first one being James Madison coming back after that win against Michigan State. Obviously, a lot of eyes on that game due to what they did up at the Breslin Center earlier this week. And they get off to a good start there against Kent State, who's a strong team right on the cusp of another top 100 KenPom opponent. That game goes down to the wire. And then one of the, honestly, craziest comebacks you're ever going to see. You're down 5 points with 3.8 seconds to go with the ball underneath your own basket. Full court heave. They hit a 3. The clock runs out, but then they go and they review it. They say there's a few seconds, or there's 1.2 or something left. Offensive foul. Great way to kind of draw the offensive foul. And then a beautiful out of bounds play from underneath the basket for a wide open layup. Game goes to overtime. James Madison wins it in double OT after themselves almost blowing it at the end of the first overtime. So I think it's without a doubt so far, we've got games today, but I'd be surprised if anybody surpasses James Madison as the clear team of the week here in the opening week of college basketball.
Yeah, James Madison is the storyline of this early college basketball season, the first week. The Michigan State win, obviously incredible going in, getting that win. And then they turn around and just play an absolute banger of a game last night. They're going to be fun to watch in the Sun Belt. They definitely have the talent to win it this year. Don't be surprised to see them on seed line come March.
Absolutely. And then the next game after, I didn't catch too much of it, but I know you had eyes on New Mexico, who, like we were talking about a couple days ago, Final Four buzz for them. I know they were out without one of their key guards heading over to St. Mary's. They did win last year at St. Mary's, but from the looks of things, this St. Mary's team is looking quite strong out of the gates. I know you had eyes on that one for most of that game.
Yeah, a bit of a different story this year. St. Mary's dominated both halves, just start to finish. Aiden Mahaney is an absolute star. He had his coming out party last year against Gonzaga when they knocked him off at home in Moraga. But he's one of the best guards in the country. He could be playing anywhere. He had 21 in the first half, just knocking down shots, getting his teammates involved. And boy, this St. Mary's defense, man, they are tough. They are physical, and they're going to hammer you on both ends of the glass. They had more offensive rebounds than New Mexico had defensive rebounds late into the first half. They're a physical team. It's probably Randy Bennett's best team he's had. You know, picked to win the WCC, which we talked about earlier. I think there's some value on Gonzaga, but yeah, this team's tough, and this team's going to be. I think their floor is a 6 or 7 seed, and I think their ceiling is a 2 or 3.
Absolutely. And I think, and I saw some other people talking about this as well, and it's just true of what Randy Bennett does there at St. Mary's. The ability to control the pace of the game against almost any style of play that they come up against. Obviously useful during the regular season, but that is the skill set of a team that has success in March because, again, we talked about it almost in the first episode of the season here. When you get to March, that high pace, flying up and down the floor type of game is just the high risk, high reward that doesn't necessarily pay off across multiple games in March. And so St. Mary's 100% a team to watch, and one that will be playing in the same tournament as our Washington Huskies here I think it's next week, San Diego State there as well, and Xavier. That's actually a pretty compelling little 4-team matchup. I think they'll be in Vegas for that. And on that note, our Huskies did move to 2-0. Wasn't quite as seamless as a performance as it was on opening night against Bellarmine, but as we've said as well, we'll be keeping tabs on the Mike Hopkins story for our Huskies up there. And 2-0 start, and it looks like Keon Brooks, maybe one of the best players in the country for Washington this year.
Yeah, Keon, guy that was at Kentucky, comes over to UW, finds a new home. Last year he was good, but he still didn't tap into that potential. You saw flashes of it. And then this year he comes out, he gets 32 and 10 last night, 9 for 10 from the free throw line. So just punishing you from all 3 levels. He can score. Really needs to work on his facilitating a little bit, but you see the flashes of him being an NBA level guy, and why he was so highly recruited coming into Kentucky. And yeah, UW looks good. They've got depth this year. They've got Kepnong and Mia coming off the bench, so some much needed big man depth. Paul Mulcahy coming over from Rutgers. Severe Wheeler, a guy that was dang near all conference at Georgia. He goes to Kentucky. Doesn't really work out for him. He comes and finds a new home at Washington. So a lot of experience in the backcourt. You got Corin Johnson coming off the bench, a guy that dropped 25 in the first game. Wesley Yates was a top 50 recruit out of Beaumont, Texas. He's not healthy yet. So if UW can get him back and he can be what people think he can be, I think they're going to finish a lot higher than they're picked 9th in the Pac-12. That was pretty disrespectful. I think it's a top half the conference team, and they keep the pieces together. They stay healthy. They could be knocking on the door come March.
100%. And I would agree. And just watching those first couple of games, only saw the second half last night, but just looks like a better team than Mike Hopkins has had at his disposal. And going to the man-to-man defense has looked good so far through the first couple of games. Obviously not the strongest of opponents to start, but not terrible. And that matchup down in Vegas here next week with San Diego State playing St. Mary's, Washington playing Xavier, and then obviously the winners and the losers of that are going to play. That's going to be a sneaky good little tournament down there in the next week or so. But before we get to next week or so, we've got today and this Friday, like I said, marquee games across the board. The one that's jumping to everybody's attention. I was in the DraftKings app earlier. It's got its own little tab in the DraftKings app because they know the action is going to be on Arizona heading to Duke tonight. Coach K going to be in attendance. We were talking about that before. He can't seem to stay away from the program. He'll be there tonight. All eyes will be in Durham for that matchup this evening at Cameron. Hunter, give me the high level. This is, I believe, number 6 versus number 8 in KenPom to start off the season. Yeah, Arizona at 6, Duke at 8. The line here for this one is at the moment, you can get -5 on Duke at Caesars. You can get plus 5.5 on Arizona at Pinnacle, and the over-under falling kind of in the 154 to 155 range. What are you thinking out of the gates, and what should we be looking for in this Arizona-Duke matchup?
First thing I got to say is absolutely love that Tommy Lloyd and Arizona are willing to go play this game. Not on a neutral court. They're going into Cameron Indoor. I think it's awesome for college basketball. I hope more high level programs continue to do this and have home and homes because, yeah, this is a marquee matchup. This could be a Final Four preview. I'm so excited. You can't look at this game and not look at the Caleb Love storyline. 2 years ago in the Final Four, he's the best player on the court, knocks off Coach K for his retirement party. Now he gets a chance to come back into Cameron Indoor. Again, looking at Duke, they bring back Filipowski. They bring back Jeremy Roach, the senior guard. Filipowski, the All-American preseason player. All eyes are going to be on him. But they also bring back Mark Mitchell. They bring back Tyrese Proctor. So they had that experience and those guys getting their sophomore campaigns going. And then they bring in these really talented freshmen. You got the TikTok sensation, Jared McCain. He looked good in the first game. And then, yeah, year 2 of the John Shire era, the secession. Shout out John Rothstein. Duke's going to be really fun to watch. Looking at this game, I don't think I have a side, but I'd probably look at the over here. Knowing Arizona, they're going to want to get out and run. They're going to try to run you out of the gym. Even if it's a high-level team, they like to get out in the fast break. They like to take open shots early. And then Duke's going to play a free-flowing game of basketball as well. I think Shire's he's more of a coach's player or a player's coach, than I think Coach K is from what I've seen. He gives them a little more freedom. So I'd be looking at the over tonight and just what's going to be a really exciting game to follow.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you bring up the over-under because that was actually something that I wanted to talk about, and I might be on the other side of that, leaning towards the under. And so, we're starting out right out of the gates, giving people what they want, a little bit of action on both sides. And so, for me, what I think is interesting, kind of to your point about Shire and what he did in his first year as a coach, I was just looking at some of the numbers earlier. Obviously, Arizona is going to play one of the most up-tempo styles of basketball in the entire country. But year 1 under Shire, they were a little bit slower on the offensive end than they were under Coach K. They actually an adjusted tempo, 298th in the country in year 1 under John Shire. So when we look at what they were under Coach K, just for kicks here, yeah, they were averaging, at least in the most recent years, kind of top 50, top 100 in pace. So Shire seemingly slowing it down a little bit in year 1 there at Duke. And in the opening game, obviously they played Dartmouth, so tough to judge much about that. They went at 92-54. But there could be an interesting dynamic here of a potential kind of a pace battle between Shire trying to slow it down and Arizona going faster pace. If it does settle into that kind of, you got one side trying to slow it down, you got Arizona trying to pick up the pace. Where do you maybe see an edge, at least, especially thinking about it in the context of this early in the season? Would you expect a high-powered offense to kind of be able to kind of run and gun early, or do you think there's a defensive edge for teams that maybe focus on that side of the basketball this early in the season?
Yeah, I think the pace is going to tell the story in this game. If Duke can play their style of basketball and they can defend Arizona for 94 feet, they can slow them down. I think this game definitely favors Duke if it gets into a half-court possession game. Also favors the under there. But I'm really looking for Arizona and Tommy Lloyd to get out and run. They don't back down. They play their style of basketball. I think they're really looking forward to this opportunity. I also think Caleb Love, he might be a little sporadic tonight, but he's going to be looking to go out, get 25 or 30. It's going to be an exciting game. Again, yeah, if it gets slowed down in the half court, that's going to favor Duke. But we'll see if they can slow down Arizona. Arizona's got a lot of hype this year. Ken Palm top 10 team for a reason. So if they can get out and run and gun, you could see Duke maybe try to match that a little bit with some young guys just excited for the big moment.
Yeah, 100%. And I think a lot of that's going to come down to the battle at the guard spot with, the experience of Roach and Love on both sides. Ultimately, really, which one of those guards can both dictate the pace and be as efficient as possible. And I think my lean, and obviously we see this in the number with Duke as a 5-point favorite. You take out the home court advantage there, and that's probably Duke on a neutral floor by a point or two. And I think that a lot of that has to do with the fact of the volatility of Love at the guard spot. But to your point, this is an opponent and a place where he's had success before. So it'll be really interesting to see this early in the season, just what he brings to the table from an ability to kind of play the game at the style of play that Arizona wants to play, which is going to be this up and down style of play.
Yeah, and another guy I'm really excited to see tonight, Kylan Boswell. He enrolled early at Arizona. He was playing when he was 17 years old last year, sat behind Kerr Kriisa, but got some experience. I'm really excited to see what he can do in a starting role for the Wildcats. Highly recruited kid, plays basketball the right way, can fill it up. Him and Love are going to be a very exciting backcourt.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, you look at this Arizona schedule, to your point about Tommy Lloyd not being afraid to go play this game, they're going to play Purdue later this season as well. They've got a myriad of tough matchups in the non-conference. I think when we, again, just going back to kind of looking at the spread, looking at the numbers here, the 5 seems fair, kind of in this game with the advantages that Duke has playing at home, and that's really honestly the biggest advantage they have in this game. I think on a neutral floor, I might give the edge to Arizona, and because of that, I guess if I was betting this game on the spread, I'd probably lean to Arizona because I think giving Duke, that point or two on a neutral floor that this line kind of reflects, I'd probably go Arizona in that case. Just again, I agree with you that this early in the season, I lean towards a team that's just going to kind of run up and down and wants to get up and down and play that style of play. I lean towards more of that style of play versus a team that wants to slow it down and get into the half court. You may just not be quite as polished there. So I think I'd lean Arizona if I had to make a play on the spread. I'm not by any means saying I'm super confident about it, but that would be where I would go. How do you feel about that?
I'm not on either side of the spread here. I think the line feels right. To your point, I think if this game's in the McKale Center in Tucson, I think Arizona, it's a 1-point favorite or it's a pick 'em. If it's neutral court, I think it's Duke by 1 or 2, and it's in Cameron Indoor, so it's 5. I think the line feels right. If I had to pick a side, I think I'd go with Arizona here. I mean, maybe some Pac-12 bias, but I really believe in this Arizona team. I really believe in Tommy Lloyd. And it's just such a great opportunity if they can go into Cameron Indoor and pick off the number 2 team in the country. Duke's number 2 team in the country, but they haven't earned that yet. They were just given that in the AP poll. So it'll be a great litmus test, and it would just be a massive win for the Pac-12.
Yeah, and I think that point you made there at the end is another aspect, again, of where I think I lean Arizona here against the spread, just because the pressure here is all on Duke. This is nothing but Arizona could lose by 20 points and no one, is going to hold that really against Arizona. For Duke, they've had this off season full of expectations. They come in highly ranked. They've got a home game against a marquee opponent here. If anything, the pressure out of the gates on Duke. Arizona can kind of run and gun, play their style of play. Nothing really to lose. So really excited about this game. And obviously, we'll be watching it, keeping tabs, and we'll be talking about all of these games' outcomes next week. But this is the marquee game of the day at 7 o'clock Eastern time. I know a lot of eyes will be on that without really too much else going on the sports calendar. So a great chance for a marquee game out of the gates here. Up next in this day of great games, Tennessee at Wisconsin. Up there in Madison, 9 o'clock, actually on Peacock, it looks like, and that Arizona Duke game is going to be on ESPN2 tonight. We look at Tennessee, we look at Wisconsin. Out of the gates, instantly think about defense here with these two teams. Hunter, what are you expecting up at the Kohl Center tonight at 9 o'clock?
You can expect a slow game. You can expect an absolute slugfest. Both these teams hang their hat on the defensive end, and both these teams are experienced. Tennessee gets Vescovi and Ziegler back. They have the experienced backcourt. They get Josiah Jordan-James, a defensive-minded wing, back. And then they fill up the rest of the roster with transfers. They got Jordan Gainey from USC Upstate, Dalton Connect from Northern Colorado, Grant Hurst from Tennessee Martin, Kalen Macon from the Citadel. So they've got a lot of old guys, and they're going to hang their hat on the defensive end, just like every Rick Barnes team. You look over at Wisconsin, they return almost every player. The only guy they lost was Jordan Davis. They have Hepburn, they have Kroll, they have Wall. All these guys have been here before. They've been in the Wisconsin system. And, Greg Gard, going to slow it down. One of the slowest teams in the country, going to go possession by possession. So knee-jerk reaction to this without seeing the number, just take the under. I mean, it's going to be an absolute slugfest. I can see this game being in the 50s, low 60s.
So we're not the first ones to be thinking defense, slow game here, just for reference. We look at that Duke-Arizona game, like we said, the over-under is hanging around 154, 155. The over-under at the moment in this Tennessee-Wisconsin game is 132.5 on BetMGM, 133 on DraftKings, almost 21 points less expected here in this Tennessee-Wisconsin game. And to your point about the pace, we look last year at Wisconsin, 337th in the country in adjusted tempo. And then you've got Tennessee at 288th in the country in adjusted tempo to strong defensive teams. Last year, Tennessee number 1 in the country defensively on KenPom, Wisconsin number 19. Wisconsin struggled mightily shooting it from the floor last year, ranking 322nd in the country in 2-point percentage, coming up against a defense in Tennessee that last year led the country in 3-point defense, 15th in the country at 2-point defense. We've got a spread here of Wisconsin plus 2.5 on Pinnacle, Tennessee at -2 on DraftKings up there in Madison. I have a hard time seeing how Wisconsin wins this game unless they've made some great improvements off of where they were last year. I lean Tennessee. Thoughts there, Hunter, on maybe a side or who you think has the edge here?
At 2.5, the road favorite. I think the books are looking for you they're inviting you to take Wisconsin plus 2.5. So it just feels like a Tennessee line all the way. I think everyone you look at a close game at home, you're going to want to be with the home team. But I do think Tennessee is worthy of this going just favorite into the game. Vescovi and Ziegler, they could be the best backcourt in the SEC. Tennessee's plus 300 favored to win the SEC. It's a great chance for them to go out and prove it and get a great win to start the year. So I'd be on Tennessee in this one.
And I'm going to add to that too. And this is the first day of the season. We're probably going to get half these games, maybe all these games wrong. There's still so much time to learn about these teams. And we're, working off a lot of what we saw last year versus being able to analyze these games on obviously this season. Another thing that is just in this first week of the season, the Big Ten has not been impressive by any stretch of the imagination in some of their games. And I think the SEC has had some solid wins, thinking especially of Mississippi State, a team that I'm high on this year, absolutely crushed Arizona State. Yep. Earlier this week in Chicago. So I think the SEC has looked tough. And to your point, Tennessee favored and considered the best team in the SEC. They get Vescovi back. They head up there to Wisconsin. Obviously a tough place to play. You don't want to get too excited about betting on road favorites going up and playing in Madison. I'm sure the atmosphere there is going to be electric, but give me Tennessee minus the 2 up there in Madison. And to your point, the over under 133 and 132.5. But to your point, this thing could be a rock fight. And I think it tends to be when you get these super low over unders or even super high over unders, depending on the style of play, more often than not, that it tends to go in the same direction that the line was going. So there may not be an over under that's too low for this Tennessee Wisconsin game. We'll find out soon enough. But this is a game, honestly, where obviously I'm excited for Arizona at Duke, and that's the marquee game of the day. This is that kind of mid-level. You've got number 9 KenPom against number 16 Wisconsin, where this is a litmus test for both these teams. We're going to have a really good sense of them going forward coming out of this one.
Yeah, Wisconsin basketball is like Iowa football for me. You just blindly take the under. I mean, they've been the same program for a decade now, even going back to their old coach. Like, they slow it down, they use the whole shot clock, and then they get back and sit down in the stance on the defensive end. So
yeah, if there's any props out there for shot clock violations tonight, yeah. I'm on the over shot clock violation. I'll set the line of shot clock violations at 3.5 tonight. We're going to be seeing some shot clock violations up in Madison without a doubt. So let's add that prop if that exists out there. Would love to see the shot clock violation prop in this one. Next up on the list, we've got number 26 in KenPom, San Diego State, coming off a trip to the national championship at BYU. Let's take a look at what we are working with on the lines here. A tight one. San Diego State, you can get a plus 2.5, and then you get a minus 1.5 actually on BYU at the moment on PointsBet/Fanatics. The money line obviously tight there. You get a little bit of plus money on San Diego State, minus 124 on BYU, and then an over under of 148.5 in this one. This game taking place in Provo, another tough place to play, especially this early in the season. But San Diego State was just in the national championship, Hunter. I don't know if they're going to be too rattled by going and playing this game out of the gates. How do you feel about what's taking place tonight in Provo?
Really exciting game. BYU stepping up this year into the Big 12. BYU's an awesome home court advantage. They're going to fit right in with that Big 12 basketball. Looking at this game, looking at San Diego State plus 2.5, I feel like this is a BYU line all the way because San Diego State's coming off the national championship. They're getting points. I think a lot of people are going to be looking at them. But one thing to remember is that they lose Matt Bradley and Nate Mensah, but especially Matt Bradley. They do bring back Butler. They do bring back Trammell. They bring back Jaden Ledee. But Matt Bradley was really that guy that they'd give the ball to create late in the shot clock, and he's going to be gone. So they're going to have to adjust a little bit. They're going to have other people step up. And I know they have the guards returning from last year. But just looking at this game early in the season, this feels like one that BYU wins.
And when we talk about pace matchups, and I'll be honest, one of my favorite things in college basketball is when we get two different styles of play against each other, because it becomes, from a live betting perspective, and I'm not saying, we're going to be tweeting out live bets or I'm going to be placing live bets on this game specifically. You can pretty quickly tell 10 minutes into one of these games where the edge is, just based on the fact of who is controlling the tempo. And when we look at San Diego State, who under Brian Dutcher has at times been one of the slowest teams in the country, they were 262nd in adjusted tempo last year. They've had teams before. Actually, statistically, the best San Diego State team was the 2020 version. They were one of the slowest teams in the country. So when San Diego State's playing the style of play that they want to play, it is slow, it is methodical, it is focused on the defensive end of the floor. And then Mark Pope at BYU last year, 65th in the country in tempo, playing a much more up and down style of play in a game where that seemingly going to be decisive, most likely, in who can control this tempo going forward.
Yeah, and if you like San Diego State in this game, I think you probably like the under. 148.5 is a lot of points for a game San Diego State's in. Conversely, if you like BYU, you probably like the over, because they're a team that likes to get out, they like to shoot it, they like to run. So yeah, definitely one of those pace battles. And to your point, within the first 10 minutes of the game, you might see who's controlling it, and then you could look at a live line to attack there.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point on the third. I'm not going to sit here and plug doing a parlay, but there's a correlation basically between who you think is going to have success here and maybe what the ultimate the score ends up being. At the same time, like you said, there's maybe an issue for San Diego State of not having that player late in the shot clock that was successful for them last year. So even if they are able to slow down this pace and play it at the tempo that they want to play, may not guarantee them anything, just because they may not have the execution on the offensive side that they've had, or at least out of the gates. You expect that to improve as the season goes on. But I agree with you. Just looking at a number, seeing a 148 in a game that San Diego State is playing, I trust San Diego State to be able to control the tempo. I don't know if they're going to have the ability to execute offensively and win this game on the road, but I do think just the experience that they bring back and what they did as a team last year, I do see them having the ability to control the tempo of this game and get it played at the style of play that they like. So if I was going to make a bet here, I think I'd take that 148.5 on BetMGM right now and go with the under in the San Diego State BYU game. But a really fun game in this kind of mid-tier. And honestly, I guess BYU's in the Big 12 now, so not necessarily that kind of upper mid-major game that it would have been in recent seasons. But 9 o'clock, that game's going to be on ESPN Plus, and a good one maybe to flip back and forth while the Tennessee and Wisconsin game is going on.
Absolutely.
Next up, 7 o'clock. So this one's going to go head to head with the Duke Arizona game. So maybe not as many eyes on this one, unless you do have the second TV setup already going this early in the season. Texas A&M, number 21 in KenPom, at number 46, Ohio State. Ohio State struggled in their season opener. I think that was against Oakland. That was who Ohio State. Yeah, Oakland. They ended up winning 79-73, but not impressive. These are two teams that we talked about in the opening podcast of the season. We were complimentary and high on what Buzz Williams is doing at Texas A&M, and another SEC team that in a really deep SEC this year that should be tough to beat. And then you've got an Ohio State team who I think you were out on Chris Holtmann right out of the gates in the first episode, and now you get them. Let's see what the odds are here. Let's get a little refresh. Get a little Ohio State. Ohio State favored -1.5 at home against Texas A&M. You can get plus 2.5 on Fanatics for Texas A&M if you like that. Positive money on the money line for Texas A&M, and an over/under kind of low here, 138.5 on the over/under. Texas A&M at Ohio State. Hunter, thoughts?
Congrats to Texas A&M on once again having NIL coffers, because you bring back Wade Taylor and you bring back Tyrese Radford. Those are two really good guards. They combined for 30 points a game last year. You also get Henry Coleman, the third back, a guy that was at Duke, an NBA body, came over, looked good last year. He's back. Yeah, I've been out on Chris Holtmann for a while now. I like Texas A&M so much in this spot that I might need to fade myself because I feel like Texas A&M is free here. I'm going to stay away from it because anytime I feel this strongly about a bet, what does Vegas know? But man, you look at Ohio State, they lost Bryce Sensabaugh, they lost Justice Sueing. So they lose those guards. They have Zed Key coming back. He's going to need to take a big step up for them if they're going to have success come Big Ten play. But yeah, I love Texas A&M in this spot. Texas A&M picks second in the SEC coaches poll. So they got a lot of expectations coming into the season. Buzz Williams he's a winner everywhere he's been, and this really feels like the year for Texas A&M to take that next step in College Station.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I thought the same thing. I didn't know what the number was until I pulled it up right there, and my initial thought was like hammer time on Texas A&M. So there may be something we don't know, especially this early in the season. I think you got to be careful of being overly confident about any given team just because it is early in the season. A team that may be good later in the season, they can have off nights. We saw that with Michigan State, for example, they've shot one of like 29 to start the year from 3-point range. There's these teams who have talent, but you just don't know out of the gates. But I think, you look at Texas A&M, a team who was improving last year as the season went on, playing in that tough SEC, ended the regular season with a win at home against Alabama, played well in the SEC tournament, did lose a game I don't know if they should have lost to Penn State, got crushed actually in the opening round of the NCAA tournament as a 7th seed. But then we look at Ohio State, and they ended the year with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. They lost like 16 out of 19 games to end the season in the Big Ten. They come out on opening night against Oakland and trail for a lot of that game and play poorly. It'd be very, very difficult for me to say anything exciting or positive about Ohio State based on what we've seen from them so far, but they're going to get that chance tonight to prove it. I think we have made it clear how we feel about this one, but wouldn't be surprised at all if we were about to be get the rug pulled out from under us by Vegas here.
Yeah, this is just your classic what does Vegas know situation. So maybe it's probably a stay away for me.
Fair enough. And a good mindset out of the gates, like I said, here this early in the season. So, and I'll say overall of these games, that's not one that I don't think I'll be watching much of that one. I'm not excited about Texas A&M at Ohio State.
No, it doesn't. There's just so many great games on the slate tonight that one's pretty low on my list.
This is an interesting one just due to our friend Mike Popper in the University of Virginia up next here. Number 27, Virginia versus KenPom, number 40, Florida. This game being played in Charlotte. Not entirely sure what that's all about, but the game being played in Charlotte. So we got ourselves a neutral site battle here between Virginia and Florida. And let's take a look at the numbers for this one. Wow. We've got ourselves an opportunity here because we have plus 1.5 on both Virginia and on Florida. And this gives me a chance to point out one of the great early season fades that is 3-0 so far. When we have BetMGM and FanDuel on the opposite side of when they both put out plus 1.5. So in this case, BetMGM has put out plus 1.5 on Virginia. So they think Florida is the favorite in this game. FanDuel has plus 1.5 on Florida. So they think Virginia is the favorite in this game. So far this year, that's happened 3 times when I've been following this at exactly 1.5 spread. It has gone to the team that BetMGM had favored. So in this case, that would be Virginia is the team that BetMGM is saying is the favorite here. That shit can obviously change very quickly, but an interesting trend out of the gates and why we like this tool that we're going to be releasing soon, just being able to track these types of things. The line plus 1.5, I guess, here for both teams and over under in the 134.5 and 136.5 are some options out there on the over under. Hunter, I think I'd lean Virginia here anyway, just out of the gates on a neutral site. And then we get that little nugget there of the FanDuel BetMGM matchup. What are your thoughts on Virginia versus Florida today?
Yeah, well, first off, really excited for the page that we're going to launch, the matchups page. It's really important if you're betting college basketball that you're getting the best lines because plus 1.5, plus one, minus 1.5, that's a 3-point swing. So again, just really important to be getting the best lines. I like this Florida team because I like the coach Todd Golden, West Coast basketball coming over from USF. They play a really open, free flowing style of basketball. They got rim runners. They're taking 3-point shots. And someone I'm really, really high on this year is Walter Clayton Jr., their point guard. If you don't know him, he was the point guard for Rick Pitino at Iona last year. Rick Pitino went on record before the tournament, said Walter Clayton Jr. was one of the best point guards in the whole country. And they gave UConn one of the toughest games they had in the UC tournament, in the NCAA tournament, on UConn's way to the championship. That said, Florida loses a ton of guys. They lose Colin Castleton in the middle. They're going to be a new look team. I have to like Virginia in this spot. I have to like their on-ball defense. I have to like the way they hang their hat on the defensive end. Again, a bit of a style clash early. And then, like you said, the FanDuel fade. It's 3-0 this year, so let's keep it rolling.
Absolutely. And I was just about to say, we get again one of these pace matchups. We've got Todd Golden at both San Francisco and Florida. He maybe not quite playing as fast as I may have guessed, ranking in the like 70 to 80 range in tempo, which honestly I would have guessed a little bit faster. And maybe that's because just the efficiency usually of his offense, it looks good out there. So that maybe they're not shooting it quite as quickly, but they're going to play a lot. They want to be moving the ball around. They want to be active on the offensive end. They're going to shoot. Well, this is actually interesting. At San Francisco, they were firing the 3-pointer.
Yeah.
In 2021, San Francisco took over half of their shots from the 3-point line, which is remarkable. That's a big number of threes to take. Didn't do that year one at Florida. Actually went from being a top 40 3-point attempt team down to 200. So definitely playing a different style of play. And another thing to note about Todd Golden and how he plays defensively, they both shoot a lot of threes and they take away the 3-point line. So he's ranked top 20 in the country every year as a coach at taking away the 3-point shot and also taking away the assist. So really making you play one-on-one, drive the basketball. And when we look at Tony Bennett offensively, he is a guy who ranks highly in assist percentage. They don't shoot a lot of threes necessarily, but I think that's a very interesting thing to watch today is, again, who can take control of this game and get it played the way that they want to play it? Can Florida make Virginia play isolation basketball? I don't ever really think of Virginia as a team who's going to beat you off the dribble and have all these great one-on-one players. So I think that's an interesting matchup. And the more I look at this, I do see things that I like about Florida, but to your point, a lot of turnover there as well.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see how Florida plays this year. You mentioned on defense, not giving up the 3. I think when you have a guy last year like Colin Castleton standing at 7 feet in the paint, you can be more aggressive, run guys off the 3-point line, maybe get beat around the corner into the lane, but you got Colin Castleton standing there. It'll be interesting to see how they play this year, missing him. But yeah, I think we're both high on Virginia. Guy I really like, Reese Beekman, Louisiana Gatorade Player of the Year, back for year 2 at Virginia. I got to lean with Virginia in this game just because of the experience they have. And anytime you can get Tony Bennett around pick 'em odds, I'll be on that side of the bet.
Absolutely. And especially when it's at a neutral site, this is, there's no home court advantage for anyone here. So yeah, I'm with you. Give me Virginia, give me the FanDuel fade. Even if it doesn't hit today, I've already cashed it 3 times. So we'll still be positive on the FanDuel fade out of the gate. And that takes us to our next game here, Memphis at Missouri. Memphis number 37, a team that Jers, Matt Gannon, when he was on here earlier this week, he was really high on Memphis. He was excited about them. They take on a Missouri team coming off of a loss in the second round of the NCAA tournament, one that they'll be kicking themselves for. They beat Utah State in the first round and got Princeton with the Sweet 16 on the line and lost that one for Dennis Gates. Let's take a look at the numbers here. We've got Memphis plus 2.5 on BetMGM, Missouri minus 2.5 there, and an over-under. We're expecting some points out of this one. 161.
Wow.
On the over-under for this one. What are your thoughts on what on paper now looks like a run-and-gun battle between Memphis and Missouri?
Yeah, looking at Memphis, you look at the Dennis Gates era, that's what you're going to get. They play fast. They take a lot of threes. They like to full court press, get up and down. They like to create those opportunities. That also means you're susceptible to opportunities going the other way. One guy I do love that they bring back, Nick Honor, just one of those first team all glue guys. Like, he was there last year, and you can't really point in the stat sheet to all the stuff that he does on the floor. Missouri does lose quite a bit from last season, so it'll be interesting to see how they fill those holes. Looking at the other side of the line, Memphis, almost an entirely new team for Penny Hardaway. They have Javon Kennerly, 5-star all everything, who was at Villanova. Then he's at Alabama. Now he lands at Memphis. He's going to be handling the point guard responsibilities. And then a really fun player for Memphis is Jordan Brown, former McDonald's All-American, starts at Nevada, goes to Arizona, is at Louisiana Lafayette last year, first team all Sun Belt, and now he lands at Memphis. This guy's got to be 23 or 24, still in college basketball, still going to produce at a high level. I'm really excited for this game. I'll be on Missouri just because I trust Dennis Gates and I trust his system. I haven't been a huge Penny Hardaway guy at Memphis. I think it'll take some time to fit those pieces together, but should be an exciting game to watch. Like you said, projected to be in the 80s. It'll be a good one to tune into.
Yeah, and I think to your point, I don't know if I have a side in this one. I think what you listed out there totally makes sense, and I'll just be honest, you have a better depth of knowledge on both of these sides than I might. But to your point on Penny Hardaway, they may play a fast style of pace tonight. I don't trust a Penny Hardaway offense to execute. I haven't seen it happen enough in meaningful games for me to trust that to take place. So they may be running up and down the floor, and I think that's the reason. Obviously, we see this over under so high, one of the highest on the boards today in the 160s. I think I'd lean to the under, not because I think that they're not going to be flying up and down the court. They're going to be flying up and down the court, but you still got to make the baskets. And I think that's why I would give it. If I had to pick something here, I'd probably lean towards the under.
Yeah, and both these teams can score, but they do it in a different way. Missouri really shares the ball. All their guys out there can stretch the floor, take threes. Memphis leans a little more towards the isolation, my turn, your turn ball. So again, another reason I'd be on Missouri in this one.
Beautiful. Let's move on from there. We've got Virginia Tech, South Carolina. I'm not too excited about that one. Any thoughts on Virginia Tech, South Carolina?
I'm not excited about the game, but I am excited about Virginia Tech. Mike Young coming over from Wofford. I believe this is now year 2. They get back Sean Padula. They get back Hunter Couture. Both guys can knock down shots at a high level. Virginia Tech takes a ton of shots. I'm not sure if you guys remember Mike Young's teams at Wofford, but Fletcher McGee was letting them fly from all over the court. They're running that same style of offense. Virginia Tech's always a fun team to turn into just with the style of play. South Carolina, Lamont Paris in year 2. He was the SoCon Coach of the Year coming over from Chattanooga. South Carolina's a tough job, man. That's a football and baseball school. It's a tough job. So interested to see what Lamont Paris can do there, but not a lot of high expectations.
And I guess we're going to talk about it a little bit now because I just pulled up the numbers and it needs to be discussed. South Carolina offensively, actually on both sides of the ball last year, just horrible. 327th in the country in effective field goal percentage. For South Carolina last year, they ranked 221st in KenPom. Now, with that being said, KenPom thinks there's hope for South Carolina this year. He's moved them from 221st up to starting the year at 61st. So wow. I don't know if it's the roster turnover that's going to do the trick here. I don't know what it is. KenPom saying that they've got a new guy from Minnesota at point guard, Talon Cooper. But for me, that is a big step up in expectations. And I think with that, obviously the number gets impacted because a lot of people this early in the season are using KenPom to, get a feel for what they think is taking place. We look at the spread. It's Virginia Tech minus 5.5, South Carolina plus 6.5. If this game was played last year, Virginia Tech probably a double-digit favorite over South Carolina. So an interesting one where I don't really have a strong opinion. I just think looking at those numbers, there's clearly been a big increase in expectations for South Carolina, and I'm going to need to see it on the floor before I would be too excited about anything that they're doing.
Yeah, this is one of those games where I'm just really excited for us to get the Vincerix Index up and running because I'm just excited to see once the data comes in where a team like South Carolina is going to fall. Shout out KenPom, man. I mean, he does great work, and he really knows what he's doing, so if he's got them at 61, he knows something I don't. Might be a stay away for me just on that alone. But yeah, South Carolina, tough place to win. If Lamont Paris can do it, that's a really admirable thing to be doing. And, he could look to take a step to an even better program if he can win at South Carolina.
Absolutely. And another battle of the ACC versus the SEC, this one down in Athens, Wake Forest at Georgia, two teams that likely would be fighting maybe for the bubble of the NCAA tournament this year. Georgia coming off of a tough game against Oregon, winning that one rather comfortably, final score 82-71, so maybe a little bit. I don't think it was ever as close as that score even reflects, but at least if you're Georgia coming into this game, you do have the experience of playing a tough opponent right out of the gates versus we get Wake Forest here who comes off a win over Elon. To be fair, they did score 101 points against Elon in that game, but they travel down to Georgia. Georgia now battle tested with the spread here being see if I can spell correctly. Yeah, Georgia -2, Wake Forest +2.5. Over under of 154.5 on Fanatics. I think that spread probably makes sense with kind of just what I listed there. Two teams pretty evenly matched statistically. Georgia at home, Georgia with better opponent out of the gates, a little more experience, maybe learn something there. I think that line's probably pretty fair. I think I probably lean Georgia bouncing back and picking up a victory here, but no strong opinions on this one. Any thoughts on Wake Forest at Georgia?
Georgia, Mike White's a coach I've liked. He moves over from Florida to Georgia. Pretty tasty move, switching rivals. Again, Georgia's just like South Carolina. It's a football school. It's a tough place to win come basketball. You know, they had the 1 year with Anthony Edwards, but other than that, hasn't been too much buzz around the program. You look at Wake Forest and Steve Forbes, they had a pretty good team last year. A lot of people were pretty high on them. They got some great wins in conference. But I think this line feels right. You know, you roll the ball out 10 times with these two, it might be 5-5. It does feel like a pick 'em. Georgia getting 2.5 with the home court. I'd stay away, but a game I might try to tune into because Wake Forest is pretty fun to watch. And yeah, be interesting to see how Georgia bounces back at home after that loss to Oregon. Also, be a good litmus test to see what that Oregon team is. You know, if Georgia goes out and beats Wake Forest, that win becomes all that more impressive.
100%. And that's a good point. And that's a thing that's, I think, worth watching, especially in these first couple of weeks of the season. Again, we're working with limited information. Yeah, we can look at the numbers from last year. Yeah, we can look at the new players on whatever team. But ultimately, what happens on the floor is what we want to be tracking. And a great way to kind of get that out of the gates with all these teams, you know, they're going to play a lot of terrible teams, but they are going to play some tough opponents, is doing that, you know, common opponent look and boosting up teams who end up picking up a few victories against teams that then go and look impressive elsewhere. So yeah, just as much as this is a test of Wake Forest and Georgia, we're gonna get some learnings about what Dana Altman's got at Oregon as well.
Yeah, and you just never want to overreact to games too early in the season because you just are not sure how the games are going to stack up at the end of the year. You know, a quad 1 can become a quad 2, a quad 4 can become a quad 2, just depending on how teams compete. So don't ever take too much, never be too high, never be too low on a team from one thing you saw. Try to let the data come in and then make your analysis.
Yep. And now going to a game that has a team that I know you talked to earlier this week, Dayton at Northwestern. Dayton 67 in KenPom, Northwestern 49. Unfortunately, Dayton with a pretty meaningful injury striking this week. Tell me a little bit about that. Tell me how you think it affects Dayton, and then how you think it affects them coming off of that, going to Evanston to play Northwestern tonight.
Yeah, just a huge blow losing Malachi Smith, the guy that had a 3-to-1 assist to turnover ratio. He has a season-ending injury last year. Coming back this year, there's so much hype around him. It just sucks, man. Dayton's projected to win the A10. They got 370 of the 400 votes in the coaches poll. So it just sucks to see a kid go down like that worked so hard to get back. But you look at Dayton, they still have so much. DeRon Holmes, especially in the middle. This guy could definitely win A10 player of the year. He's going to get you 18 and 8, 2 blocks a game last year. He's coming back. They're running the offense through him. Dayton's a fun team. And then you mentioned where are they going tonight?
At Northwestern in Evanston, home game for Northwestern.
Yeah. Northwestern, kind of one of those weird places to play. Not a great home court advantage, kind of like a Stanford football situation where it's just a tough place to go and win a game. But Chris Collins has done a great job with that program, taking them to their first 2 ever NCAA tournament appearances, second one last season, first in 2017. They bring back a great player in Boo Buie. He's such a fun guy to watch, man. He went out and got 27 in the first game of the season. This is going to be a fun game to tune into. Probably lean Northwestern just with Malachi Smith going down for Dayton. Might take them a little time to figure out the rotation, figure out who's going to step up and take those minutes, take that point guard responsibility. But yeah, Dayton's going to be good this year, but man, it's just a huge blow to the team.
Yeah, and I think, again, when we're talking about pace here, of all the games we've talked about so far, this is the lowest over and under, I think, of any of them. 128.5, 129, depending on where you're looking. You're talking about Anthony Grant, who has, ever since the VCU days, it's almost funny to see Alabama ranking so slow in tempo with how they play now, but he was slow at Alabama, slow at Dayton. Even, I mean, the last 3 years ranking outside the top 340 in tempo. And then we look at Chris Collins at Northwestern and the same thing. So we're talking about what should be a possession-based game tonight, low scoring, for sure. I think offensively, you know, they do lose the point guard, which is going to have an impact out of the gates. There's no question about that. But historically, Anthony Grant has coached much better offense than Chris Collins has at Northwestern. And when we look at the line tonight, Dayton plus 5.5, Northwestern -5 in a game that's expected to be that low scoring. That's honestly, if you play this out over a higher scoring game, that's a pretty reasonably sized spread for Northwestern favored here. I tend to lean towards this being maybe a little bit of an overreaction to the injury for Dayton. I know you're high on them and high some of the other pieces that they have. Again, not a game that I'm slamming the table to hammer, but I like Dayton here. I trust Anthony Grant to coach good offense and have the team tuned up, even losing that piece. And obviously they played without him last year, so it's not like they're completely thrown off here by what's going to take place. I think Dayton heads up and plays competitive against Northwestern tonight.
Yeah, and another thing I like about this game, if you're on the Dayton side, 5.5, 4.5 is a key number. You usually see 4.5 for a home game where it would be a pick 'em on a neutral floor. Just how it goes with close games and fouling in college basketball late. So getting that extra point, if you like Dayton, I think this is a good spot to be on them. To your point, maybe a little bit of an overreaction to Malachi Smith going out. This team did learn how to play without them last year. And then, yeah, I like Anthony Grant. I like what Dayton's bringing back. I like the program. I like their core pillars. Should be a slow one tonight. What's that projected score? Like 66-61 type situation with that over under. So probably not the most fun game to tune into, but two teams that definitely could be around 8-9 seeds come March.
Another shot clock violation over special.
Yeah, shot clock violation special.
The number of shots taken with under 5 on the shot clock tonight in Evanston is going to be
over under on banked in shots that weren't supposed to go off the glass.
At least 2. There's going to be shots and coming in at a very low trajectory too. Hard banks, not like a gentle bank off the glass. We're talking line drives, backboard, front rim, maybe backboard again, and then into the basket tonight up in Evanston. Looking through here, we've got Clemson UAB. I know Clemson was one team that you said might be a little bit interesting in the ACC this year. They go to play at UAB. They're going to be favored here, I would assume, comfortably. 6-point favorites for Clemson at UAB. That's one that they should be expected to win and one that they need to win for the ACC.
Yeah, one they're expected to win, one they need to win. But this is not as much of a betting thing. Just a guy I love. Eric Gaines started out his career at LSU. He moves over to UAB. If you haven't seen Eric Gaines play basketball, he is one of the most exciting players in the NCAA. He can absolutely get up and throw down some hammers. He's a fun player. Looking at Clemson, Brad Brownwell, he's been there since 2010. They've made the dance 3 times, haven't made it the last 2 seasons. I don't necessarily think he's on the hot seat, but I think there is some pressure for him to get back to the dance this year. A bit of a tough game for Clemson because if they win it, it's when they're supposed to win. And if they drop it, it's a tough loss to start the season. So I don't love the spot for them. I don't have a side on this game. I don't know enough about UAB. I don't know enough about Clemson, but definitely an interesting one to follow, a game that Clemson needs early on.
Yeah, and to your point, Clemson's on the bubble every year. Clemson starts the year on the bubble. They end the season on the bubble almost every season. That's probably where they'll be this year. Clemson lives on the bubble. These are not. If you're a team that lives on the bubble, you can't be losing at UAB to start the year. You need to pick up these victories. So totally agree there. And Clemson, they'll be on the bubble. They're always on the bubble.
Definitely one of those games where if you win it, it's not going to be talked about in March. But if you lose it, it's going to be up there when ESPN shows your case for getting in or not being in.
100%. And a game that we talked about, we were waiting for the actual over-under to come out because we looked at KenPom earlier this week and Jers predicted what the over-under is going to be. I can now report that Yale heading up to Gonzaga tonight, another top 100 matchup, 71 Yale at 5 Gonzaga. We've got the numbers now, and they confirm what we thought they were going to be. 154 is available at Pinnacle, 155 available at Circa. Jers, I believe, said 154
and a half.
Yep. So I'm going to need us to clip that, and I'm going to need us to screenshot this. I'm going to need to get this up on the Twitter before this game tonight for our boy Jers. Truly fantastic stuff from him. He is locked in out of the gates. A lot of people, like us, we're easing into the season. We're learning about the teams. We're not taking any strong stances in this first episode of picks. Jers, he's been ready to go. So that's a game coming up. But to note on that, there was an injury for Gonzaga that we should talk about here. When we looked at this on KenPom earlier this week, it was 14 points for Gonzaga. We see the spread now. Yale favored in the Ivy, a solid team this year, plus 12.5 on Fanatics. The best line on Gonzaga is minus 11.5 on Bet Rivers, but that comes down a couple of points due to the injury for Gonzaga. Maybe you want to touch on that.
Yeah, just devastating. Feel bad for the kids. Steele Venters coming over from Eastern Washington, where he's the player of the year in the Big Sky, blows his knee out. And a kid that was getting looks from the NBA, 6'7", can really shoot it. It's a huge loss for Gonzaga, a team that already wasn't returning a lot. It's going to be interesting to see how they fill that hole. Definitely an interesting line at 11.5, 12.5. I always love the Ivy League teams. I love the cream of the crop in the Ivy League because of the brand of basketball they play. The motion offenses, taking care of the basketball, getting good shots every possession. But you talk about the kennel, you talk about Gonzaga early on. How many times have we seen Gonzaga beat a team 95-70 in the kennel in the preseason? I won't be on either side of the line in this. There's too many unknowns. If Steele Venters was playing, I'd be on Gonzaga. But seeing him go out, it's just huge. So definitely a game that's gonna be fun to tune into. And yeah, man, shout out Jers, nailed it at 154.5 on the over under.
And yeah, I agree with you. I think it's a stay away game for me for sure. I think that, as we talked about, we followed Gonzaga for a long time. We've been close to Gonzaga being from Seattle or from Oregon and being up in this area. I just will never. It's tough for me to ever bet against Gonzaga, no matter what the spread is. Because yeah, even if it's 10, Gonzaga just starts running and gunning. They're not afraid to beat teams by 30 or 40. You don't have to worry about Gonzaga being a team that wants to protect the lead. They want to put the pedal down and accelerate it. And then at the same time, you have this Yale squad under James Jones, who comes off of a trip to the NCAA tournament, or not to the NCAA tournament last year. They probably should have been, but they ultimately lose to Princeton after a pretty good year in the Ivy. But they are a top 70 KenPom team. They're favored in the Ivy. I think it's going to be an interesting game and one of those under the radar games today with all of those other tight spreads, highly competitive games in the top 100. This one further down the list just because Gonzaga is comfortably favored here, but an interesting one to watch. And this one will be on at 9 o'clock. So kind of a late night start there if you want to have some nightcap college basketball. For me, I think that looking through here, there's just a litany of good games. If you're a college basketball fan today, even some of these mid-tier games, you're a fan of some mid-level conferences. A lot of those mid-level conferences, some of the top teams are playing some of the top teams in other conferences tonight. We'll obviously be keeping tabs across the board today and this weekend on some of these games and be talking about a lot of them come Monday. Also, just looking to this weekend, since next time we'll connect will be next week. Really nothing too exciting over the weekend, Saturday and Sunday, with a lot of schools. Still we got college football on Saturday. That's where the focus is going to be. Nobody really wants to put up a marquee and college basketball game against the NFL either. But our Huskies on Sunday actually ranked the number one game of the day on Sunday, Nevada at Washington. So we'll have eyes on that for sure.
That should be a fun one. Nevada, a team that's going to compete in the Mountain West. Yeah, go Dogs.
Yes, sir. And go Dogs this weekend against Utah. Another chance for a statement game for Washington, who continues to be doubted. I see tweets where people have Washington ranked like outside the top 10 in the country, and it's some of the funniest stuff that I've ever seen. So we've got that going this weekend. We've got college basketball tonight, though. Arizona at Duke, Tennessee at Wisconsin, San Diego State at BYU, Texas A&M at Ohio State, Virginia versus Florida, Memphis, Missouri, you name it. We've covered it tonight, and we'll be back on Monday to review kind of some of how our leans probably went out of the gates, talk about some of the games, and preview a big week next week. I've got my tickets for Monday, Michigan at St. John's, Rick Pitino, first big game at Madison Square Garden on Monday.
Yeah, that'll be a fun one for you to be too.
Awesome. Well, keep us posted down there at McNeese. 3 games against not the strongest of competition, but a good chance to tune up before some more marquee games for McNeese. Hunter, appreciate you coming on and look forward to watching these games tonight.
Thanks for having me.